Thanks a lot for doing your awesome keynote, man. We know that the timing for you is not really conducive, and in fact, you were supposed to come down to Amsterdam last year, and then we said we move it to this year, and we planned all of these things, but you're still at home, bro. That sucks.
Yeah, I have a really nice credit voucher with British Airways to take me to London, because we were going to go to London and then take the train to Amsterdam.
Oh, wow.
And, the world fell apart.
Who could have guessed, right? Who could have guessed? I mean, I haven't left my house in a year, bro. It's kind of weird, like I haven't been on a plane in more than a year, and it feels so odd.
Yeah. It's, and you can see, it's like my 70s rock star haircut, which is, I think I got it cut in like July.
Well, you look good, bro. You look good. So, maybe just keep that look, man. It looks good. But yeah, man, just touching a bit about your keynote that you just gave, right? I was just talking to Sriman just a minute ago about the fact that, now that we're with COVID and we have all of this contact tracing stuff. So in Asia, it's mandatory, right? Wherever you go, into any mall or into any restaurant or any institute, basically, you need to scan a QR code. It used to be that they would allow you to just scan the QR code using your phone, so just the web browser, and then you could fill in anything you like into the name, into the phone number. That's what I used to do, right? I just used to put in a fake phone number. But now they've made it that you have to use the app. And, I'm just wondering what's your thoughts about this, man, because we're kind of giving up all our privacy and we don't have a say in it, right?
Yeah. Well, the EFF opinion, the way that we have phrased it is we don't want any vaccine bouncers. That there are places where vaccination requirements are appropriate. I mean, it's like universities want to reopen, and particularly when they are private institutions, they say you got to be vaccinated to come on campus. That's fine, but it's also what we would call a one and done thing. It's like I show you my card, I prove that I got vaccinated, and then you let me on. But the things that we really don't want is that we don't want to see a surveillance system get put into place, that particularly one that is hard to take down, because after the 2001 terrorist things, there are like all sorts of surveillance things that went into place that never got taken down again. And we also want to make sure that there's proper equities in place. There are people who can't get vaccinated. There are people who can't afford phones. There's all sorts of places where people will fall between the margins, and that's a bad thing. So there needs to be something in place to accommodate them.
So, the question is, bro, what is going to be in place? You know what I mean? Like, as hackers, right, what can we do? Because at the end of the day, we're only a small portion of society, right? And the bulk of society wants everything to go back to normal, no matter whatever it takes. And if you think of September 11 as an example, right, like air travel completely changed, right? We take off our shoes and we take our laptops out of our bags because why? Security theater, right? It makes everybody feel safe, but it doesn't actually do anything. But that was all fine and well because the data wasn't exactly being collected or stored or, referenced. But now with contact tracing, right, like they store it for a certain amount of time because obviously they need to trace whether you've been in close contact with somebody who has COVID, right? But how long is that data going to be sitting around for? And more importantly, can we ask for it to be removed, right? I don't really think nobody's been really talking about that, right? And before we know it, it's going to become like de facto. And then it's too late to put the genie back into the bottle.
Yeah. It's like, let me be a little hopeful and say that we are very fortunate that the vaccines are better than anybody thought they were going to be. They've been coming out faster than anybody thought they were going to be. I was pretty cynical about things a year ago, and the good news keeps coming. So I think that what we are dealing with right now is mostly supply chain issues, because, you know, it's like we have to get 7 billion people shots. And that's a huge logistical problem. The good news that we're seeing out of the way that they work is that we may not need a booster. Or Moderna has already said that they have prepared a third one that is an improved vaccine against the COVID spike proteins. And they're even saying they might be able to take on all sorts of other coronaviruses. So this messenger RNA stuff is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely
I'm
a
going to be a
hope.
little hopeful.
There's definitely hope. But, you know, I mean, I'm just worried that people are just going to not bother, you know what I mean? We're thinking about how that data is going to be abused. I mean, I'm always concerned about that. People give up our privacy so easily without really thinking. We used to make a big deal about Foursquare, like checking into Foursquare, right? It was always kind of like, hey, look at that silly guy checking into Foursquare, you know, telling the whole world what he's eating for lunch and blah, blah, blah. But that was fine because it was just shared with your Facebook and your social media and stuff. And, you know, but now if it makes it mandatory, like I think Kuwait passed a law that if you don't get vaccine, right, you can choose to not get vaccine, no problem, but you cannot attend university, as you just mentioned, right? So you don't get access to education. You can't travel, which is a big one. Everybody wants to go for holiday. And, you know, and you can't get access to the mall. I mean, like, that's a big one. I think, like, you know, most people need to go to the mall at least sometime just to shoot the breeze, right? But they're making that mandatory that if you don't get your vaccine, you don't get access.
The civil liberties part of me and the public health part of me are in tension with each other, because, you know, the quicker we get to the vast majority of us being vaccinated, the more that we can cut a lot of this down. And on the one hand, we're seeing that the vaccines are extraordinarily effective. And if you think about it in terms of our rights perspective, the dangers of not being vaccinated are that you're a danger to yourself and you're a danger to others.
Yeah.
Well, the more that the danger to others goes down, the more that we can say, hey, why does it matter that they don't get it? They're only hurting themselves. And I think that is a thing that the insanity that we have in the US, which is a different insanity than that one, it's amusing that you know, free donuts or a lottery ticket will get people to decide, well, okay, I'll get vaccinated, when they were pounding their fists 10 minutes before saying they weren't going to. But I'm not quite ready to really venture out. I'm like 3 weeks past my second one, and I went out to a restaurant with friends a week ago, and my partner and I, it's like today/yesterday was her birthday, and so we're thinking that we're going to go out to a French bistro and have steak frites this weekend and a bottle of wine. And I'm kind of feeling like that's okay. But there are other things where I'm a little nervous about. It's like, I'm really not sure that I want to get onto an airplane for another few months. And it's not because of health concerns. It's because I'm afraid that things are just going to be all messed up. We have gone on a music festival that is on a cruise ship for a few years now, and we did not sign up for the next year one, not because we thought there were health considerations, but because there's all sorts of insanity of things, like the cruise line has said that they're going to demand that everybody gets vaccinated. The governor of Florida says, you can't do that, you can't force people. And so the cruise line says, fine, so we're going to sail out of Miami anymore. You know, the whole thing just for stupid reasons that are unrelated to the public health issues.
Yeah. But I mean, you bring up an interesting point as well, because do you think that conferences are going to change? I mean, like DEF CON, right? 20,000, 30,000 people, you know, like, will we see events of that size in the next, I don't know, let's just say 2 years maybe? I don't think so, you know. I have a feeling that we're going to go back to much smaller, interactive, or maybe like hybrid kind of style, because people have gotten used to staying at home, unfortunately. Like, you know, Zoom has now become kind of like de facto conference delivery method, right? So I'm worried about that, you know, that people will just kind of like, well, I don't feel like traveling. I haven't traveled, so I'll just stay at home and I'll skip the conference maybe. And the community will kind of disintegrate in a way, right? If you think about just security community, we used to go and meet each other almost every summer, right? Like it was like a thing on the calendar, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that things will get better. I mean, I agree with you that things are still going to be a bit of a mess 2 years from now. But 5 years from now, I think things are going to be a lot more like normal. But I also think that these hybrid conferences are a good idea. You know, there are a lot of people for whom I'm partially deaf. And because of that, this is really good for me. I mean, if we were in a noisy room, I would really be having a bit of trouble listening to you. But over Zoom, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, Zoom is great for us hard of hearing people.
True. In fact, I was suggesting, I think I had a chat with some conference organizers, and I was saying, wouldn't it be cool, because I'm into AI, that we use GPT-3 to do live transcriptions. So then we can do foreign language, right? And we could have speakers speaking in Japanese or in Chinese, and because that's easier for them to communicate in. But then we will be able to read the subtitles on the fly, right? Because subtitling is normally a very human intensive, like doing live translation is human intensive, it's crazy. But that would be so cool, right? Like we should use the technology for that, right? And make it more inclusive so that, you know, people, more people can participate. I think that would be quite cool.
And there's a lot of people who really want changes in the way that work is going. And there are people who don't, but one of the things that I'm finding is that we're finding common ground. EFF is a very San Francisco organization. I mean, it's been in San Francisco, and it's always been, you need to be here in San Francisco. And some of the benefits are related to the fact that it is an organization in an expensive city, so it helps people afford living in an expensive city. But my group, which is the Tech Projects group, we're just fine staying home. It's like, you know, one of the people in my group, she says, if I stay at home, nobody steals my lunch. I can play music that I like. I can do my programming, and I'll come out and have drinks with you after work, but no, I'm going to work here. And I live like about an hour away, and one of the other managers who works for me lives about an hour away north of San Francisco. And so we're perfectly fine with continuing to work. We've shown that we've been incredibly productive the last year. So we're, for our group, looking at how we might be able to do things like be able to hire people outside of San Francisco that have skills but don't want to move to San Francisco because we're already doing things remotely. Now, the lawyers, for example, you know, it's like I joke about this and I say that, you know, people whose job is sitting around a table arguing with each other want to get back into a room where they can sit around a room and argue with each other. But the people who want to hold 50 things in their head while they type them in, they want a nice, quiet room and not be disturbed. Well, the fact that the tech people aren't around the office so much means that there's more space for the lawyers. So, you know, it's like the lawyers are going, oh, really? Oh, really? You don't need that office? I'd love to have that office.
Fair point. Jon, we have a question from one of the listeners. He agrees about the privacy part of the presentation, but about the part of personal censoring, he has a couple of questions. The first
Sure.
one is, are you not afraid that by selecting only comfortable and, according to someone, correct information provided instantly, that you are creating a technological protective bubble that in the long run would make people unable to have a normal conversation without those filters?
There's a lot of things that can go wrong. and I mean, I am worried about things like that, but I also think that, it's like I'm trying to point towards a future that we could build. And the fact that there are lots of us who are going directly to here are the things that go wrong. This is precisely the skills that we have. And by seeing the problems ahead of time and saying that we need to build things and to not have these bad things happen, but we want the good things happen, is what we need to be able to do to get there. And, and nothing's perfect.
Right.
Does that make, does that make any sense?
It does to me.
It does to us, bro. Makes perfect sense to us.
His follow-up question is there not the same problem that with all tech that someone will use this link to their truth, actually spreading their message, or even commercial spots provided to input their version of the truth inputs to these kinds of solutions?
I didn't follow all of that, but I'm going to agree that yes, yes, and again, this is what we're good at. We're good at seeing the problems ahead of time and saying, what are we going to do? And I'm a late career person. I'm an old person. It's like young people have new brilliant ideas, and I have faith in them that there are all sorts of people who will think of ways to do that. And what I want to do with this talk and other things is to say, yes, there is a future that we want to drive to, and the road is going to be bumpy. And I don't have all of the answer, but we've got lots of smart people around.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess that sums it up.
That sums it up, bro. I mean, there's not much else to say to that. I think Cooper had a question as well. Let me just take a look here. So Cooper wanted us to just ask you this, right? Basically, if authorities try to surveil, but, ad companies are trying to sell your info to the government, right? Would changing the TOS actually help or not? Because, at the end of the day, people don't really read the TOS anyhow, right?
I think that there are a lot of trends going on now that will help. I mean, one of the reasons why I made a pivot from being in tech companies to being in nonprofits is that I think there's a lot of problems that we are going to be solving through policy and, meaning, laws, rules, etc., that the technology itself was not going to do correctly. I am a huge fan of GDPR. It's not perfect, but I think it's an absolutely wonderful way to go forward. Here in the US, there's a California privacy law that is pretty good. It's not perfect either. We're getting a few other ones, and we're getting also some other things around that are really cool, like the state of Illinois has a biometric privacy law that they've had for years now that has been highly effective. There's a whole bunch of biometric tracking where if you happen to live in Illinois, so if you live in Chicago, you get privacy protections that are better than anybody else in the world does for biometric protection because they've got this law and they allow you to sue people. And I think that as we go on, that we're going to get some more of these. Europe's going to do a good job. GDPR has been nice because a bunch of companies have done things like say, GDPR is our privacy policy worldwide. I mean, it's easier to only have one. And if you went through all of this trouble for GDPR, why not do it? Why not just do it that way? And if we start getting a consensus for how we manage this privacy, it will be good. But yes, I mean, this is part of the slog that EFF does, is that we are campaigning and leading for and exposing the things that the ad tech people do, because by exposing them and explaining them, people understand what they should be against. Because, it's like, we security people will tell people, oh my God, there's this horrible thing going on, and they kind of look at us funny until we demonstrate it. Just like the old saying, I want a POC or GTFO, is that people who aren't us want an equivalent of a POC. And by exposing these things, we're showing what the harms really are, and we can get them behind these sorts of changes.
Yeah, makes sense. I don't think we have any other questions, but Sriman, do you have anything that we wish to? I mean, it's very rare that we get Jon to be just ready and available for us to ask him anything we want, and plus it's EFF, right?
Yeah. Does anyone have any last minute questions for
anybody?
us?
Last minute questions? Maybe just let us know in the Discord, else we'll let Jon go, because it's been a long day.
There was one last one.
What is? Great.
It's a bit generic, so you can answer it how you wish. Do we think our incident response differs too much?
Our internet what?
Incident response as in from organization to organization?
I would assume so, yeah. The question was, do you think our incident response differs too much? I mean, we could go from organization to organization in this scenario.
What I mean, yeah. Do you think that, so the way that organizations are handling incident response, some of them tend to be a little bit more forthcoming with what exactly happened, and also letting people know what they're going to be doing to not prevent that from happening again. But then there are other companies that just can't be bothered, I suppose, or maybe they just sweep it under the rug and hope that it doesn't leak, because it's only when it hits the news, then they kind of like, oh damn, we need to do something about it, right? And they hope that nobody finds it so that they can just ignore it, right?
Like what you said,
Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that? On maybe how incident response could play a role?
Standardized.
Yeah, be standardized in some way, maybe? I don't know.
I'm not sure standardizing is always the right idea. I think that we should continue to think about how we do things and do them better. But one of the things that concerns me about incident response is that we have this tendency to make it be a tussle between the security researchers and the vendor, and nobody is looking out for the end users. And this falls into things like when we finally talk about what vulnerabilities and exploits existed, the people who, for usually bad reasons, but sometimes good reasons, are lagging, they're now vulnerable in ways that is not really right. And an example of the more generic answer came out a few days ago, where these ransomware people got alerted by a security company that they were doing their crypto wrong, and they fixed their crypto in the ransomware.
How nice.
So that I view that as an incident response failure. They teach the bad guys how to do things better. So,
that's a good one, yeah.
So that's one of the things that we want to do. And I will admit that when I have been, because, it's like, I'm primarily a developer, and that's one of the things that you need to realize is that I come at this from a product designer and software engineer point of view. I have buried fixes to really, really, really horrible bugs in things because I didn't want it for people to be easy to find them. I knew people would be diffing the code. So, it's like this, and you stick it in the middle of 100 megabytes of other things that you're doing, and say, oh, look over there.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's like, if you look at what changes get done on software, there are little hints like improves stability. You know, when you see improves stability, install it right away. Because that's how a software engineer says, "Oh dear God, this is exploitable."
What about embedded, bro? I mean, what we're going to do about embedded? The fact that, you know, a lot of the IoT devices, for example, right, like they're using really old Linux DLLs or whatever, like, you know, library files, right, and they are unpatchable because they're burnt onto the chip, right? So those guys really are sticking it somewhere where hopefully nobody will see.
This is going to be a thing that we, society, need to handle in the ways that we have done other things in the past. For example, Consumer Reports, which is an organization in the US that puts out magazines that rates automobiles, washing machines, stereo systems, etc. They now have a digital lab in Silicon Valley.
Oh.
And they've hired writers that I know who are fantastic writers who've been putting out cybersecurity articles. They're testing stuff. This is one of the things that will go forward. When I was at Apple, my team was working on how you would get something certified for HomeKit. And we were saying that we would not simply do things like protocol tests so that you could do HomeKit correctly, but we would do things like essentially some sort of attacks against the device. We would do things like make sure that it was running a decent operating system version. We would test all sorts of other things for the overall cybersecurity of the device before we would do this. And if the ecosystem people who are making things like, you know, Apple, Google, Amazon, Baidu, you name it, if they're going to be doing things where they take seriously their responsibility, because we have other things in other parts of our society where if you want to put food into grocery stores, it will go through certain amounts of testing. There are processes in place. You just don't throw it over there. And we need to be bringing those sorts of things into what we do. And it's going to be a rocky road to get there because there are some things that are good ideas, things that feel like good ideas, and things that may not be such good ideas. And we don't know how to navigate this space yet.
Makes sense. Yeah. Do you have any other questions from
We
this
do
one?
have one more here.
Oh.
By Fish again. So his question is, John Gilmore presented on CCC Congress, Nothing to Hide once. His statement about privacy was, or we need to make all privacy data public so you can't steal it anymore, or we need to accept it's going bad at once and we lose our data. How do you think about this now, 12 years down the road?
I think we can do better. I think that John was reflecting a thing that was going on like, 12 or 15 years ago where people were saying, oh my God, everything is broken. And we have been managing to fix a whole bunch of things. And while things are still broken, they are broken differently, and we're seeing a lot of progress in places. Like, I am thrilled that we now have memory-safe things like Rust going on. We have Rust being done in places where we can be thinking about building ROMs, network infrastructure, etc., where we're doing stuff that is better on, that we're actually starting to get better, not only at software engineering with tooling, but explaining why we need to change what we're doing. I have some friends who keep track of bugs and so on, and approximately 2/3 of all bugs are memory safety issues. And their drumbeat on how memory safety is 2/3 of all of the problems is making headway. I mean, like I said before, the security stance that we are in now is better than we were in 20 years ago. I think that we're going to make progress on a whole bunch of stuff because we're going to demand through not only laws, but we're going to have testing organizations that are going to be independent and go and call BS on people who are building horrible stuff. And we're going to have better tooling to make better things. So we're seeing the groundwork being laid for where we can have an increasing amount of security throughout the whole system.
Yeah. How long do you think that would take to at least form the foundation of it, when it would actually start being audited or being raised as concerns quite often?
I think things will be a lot better in 20 years.
Just around the corner.
Yeah.
Do you think that
I mean, come on, 2000 was only 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It feels like it was like not as long ago, but actually, yeah, 20 years has flown by. That is true. So it will fly by as well. But do you think that quantum is going to help at all? Like, there's a lot of people who are saying like quantum encryption and quantum computing is going to like be the next level of stuff, right? Do you think that's going to be true, or another 20 years beyond that?
I am a soft quantum skeptic.
Okay.
And what I mean is, I think it's harder than I think it's going to be. I think that while we are going to have quantum computers that will break a lot of the cryptography that we have, I think that they won't be able to break something like 4K RSA before 2050. And again, 2050 is only 30 years from now.
True.
I think that building quantum systems of the sorts of things that really are, the dream systems is further out than they think it is. It's like we still don't, there's no reason for physics or engineering why we can't have fusion power, but we don't because it's hard.
Real hard.
And I think that quantum computing is going to be a lot harder than that. I think that there's going to be a lot of problems that quantum computing can help with before it gets to the things that normally get done. Mm. It's always, quantum computer is going to break all the cryptography. But a quantum computer that can do certain sorts of memory organization or quantum information science where you can do things like have an ultra-fast clock. And an ultra-fast clock is a gravitometer, because clocks, this is Einstein, clocks slow down. And if you can use a clock as a gravitometer, that will permit us to do things like a lot of changing the way that we interact with the environment, where we'll have tools that we never had before. And I think that those are going to be coming before we have quantum computing that can break cryptography. I think that there's going to be a lot of uses for quantum cryptography that are not that we are on the 5 to 10 year verge of. They're just not going to be the sexy thing.
All right, I think we run out of time, right?
Yeah.
Like we've Jon, thanks so much. We've asked you more questions than we intended to, and I think we don't have any more questions on this.
No, we don't.
Right?
No.
Jon? Well, that's great. I mean, I've had a great time. I'm sorry that we're not in Amsterdam and can't go out for a beer chew now.
Next year.
Hopefully.
We'll do that later. And I don't mind staying up till 3 a.m. once in a while. I'm a night owl.
Awesome, bro. We really hope that we can see you again in person. as soon as possible already. I mean, I'm really hoping that we'll be able to travel as soon as we have our passport vaccination things, right? Like we're waiting for the digital cert that comes with it. And then hopefully we'll be able to meet up somewhere at least. If not this year, then definitely next year, bro. Thanks a lot again for
I think
joining
there's
us.
good chance for next year, definitely the one after that. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to be here.
Likewise, it's been really great having you, man. Thanks so much
Thanks for
for
joining us,
taking the time and for
Thank
sharing your
you.
thoughts with us. See you,
Have a good
bro.
one, John.